Well, week one is officially in the books. Did not go the way that all of us here were hoping that it would go for the Silver and Black. The Las Vegas Raiders fall to the Los Angeles Chargers. What is our final score here? 22 to 10. In a game that really it was closer than that until it wasn't. I'm joined by my man from Yahoo Sports. He is back, bigger and well, not bigger and better than ever, leaner and meaner.
Leaner.
Let's say our man Jason Fitz. And Fitz, before we dive in here. I feel like I got to take some of my own advice a little bit. I said, regardless of what happens today, good, bad, or in between, I wasn't gonna go overreact. So I shouldn't overreact to what I saw this afternoon at SoFi, right?
If you had to bet your house right now on who the better football team will be by the end of the year between the New England Patriots and the Cincinnati Bengals, who would you bet your house on? Yes, the New England Patriots got a really important win for that organization and great for Gerard Mayo, but I'm not going to sit here and say suddenly that the Bengals are a disaster. In fact, let's remember last year there were plenty of people that wanted to leave the Bills for dead until everything clicked, and all of a sudden the Bills were no longer dead. And we lived this last year watching AP take over the job when it looked like the Raiders were left for dead. We've seen this how many times? So a slow start is less than ideal. We all know that. This was not a great first game. Am I going to panic suddenly? No. Did we see sort of microcosms of what I think we're going to see all year? Yeah, and there's a lot to clean up in this game. But even with a lot to clean up in this game, with 2 minutes left, it was still anybody's football game. So I think there are some positives in an ugly game that you can take away from it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think let's just begin on kind of the positive note, right? Where, and I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly, Fitz. You're like, this might be a microcosm. This will likely be a microcosm of everything that we see from the Silver and Black in 2024, just in the sense that we talked about it during the offseason. I think this defense is going to be really, really good. I think when all is said and done in 2024, we are still going to see a really, really good Raiders defense. The offense is going to struggle to find its footing. It certainly looked that way today. It was not clean. It was clunky. It was out of sorts at times. But I think that I don't want to say that's going to be the case the entire year, but this is an offense, Fitz, that they are going to have to be opportunistic, right? Like, I don't think there's anyone sitting here in early September that is saying this is going to be the most explosive, five wide, we're going to get crazy type of offense we're going to see. It's going to be an offense that's going to be predicated on running the ball, controlling the line of scrimmage, having Minshew play point guard and not asking him to be this otherworldly type of quarterback. But it does, to your point, it does feel like kind of zoom out. Hopefully the results change a little bit over the next 16 weeks, but this is kind of what I think we're going to expect over the next little bit here, right?
I mean, think about the fact that, again, this was a 6 point game with a couple of minutes left. There were a lot of opportunities to win it. And you're talking about a team that turned the ball over a couple of times inexcusably, a team
Hmm.
that missed a field goal, a team with the turnover on downs, and a team that couldn't convert any short yardage situation, never really got the running game going with any decent threat, looked a little disorganized offensively. All of these things went bad, and it was still anybody's game in the last couple of minutes, right? So I think those are the moments you look at and say, okay, if I'm Antonio Pierce, if I'm this coaching staff with 372 coaches on the staff, we're all watching the film tonight saying, hey, there are things that can be cleaned up that will result in a different result. So there are some of those things that I think we have to look at for the rest of the season and say, okay, do I believe that one of the best kickers in the league is going to miss that field goal most of the time? No. And would that field goal have made a huge difference in the way the end of the game played out? Possibly. So those are the little things that I think automatically are going to get cleaned up that are reason to not necessarily panic, even though I'll also acknowledge that it just feels gross to be 0-1 against a Chargers team that I don't think is better than this Raiders organization.
Agreed. And now the Silver and Black have to head east, take on a very, very good Baltimore Ravens team, the other Harbaugh brother, a week from today. But let's go back, Fitz, even before kickoff, and it's something that ultimately we saw that impacted the game. Malcolm Kuntz goes on IR. He's going to be down at least the next 4 games. So what we see in his stead, well, we see a lot of Charles Snowden. We see a lot of Janoris Robinson. Obviously, Max goes out there and is a hellraiser and doing his thing. But it's hard to kind of overstate just how important Malcolm is to this defense, how important Malcolm was going to be to this defense. And look, you and I don't know what the long-term prognosis is for him. What we do know is he is down at least the next 3 games now. So in your kind of in your opinion, Fitz, what did you think from the young guys that were next man up and had to step up and fill some of that void?
I think there were some really nice moments. And I also think that the defense overall, especially in the first half, dialed up so many well-timed blitzes where they were sending people from all over the place because they know that the opposing offensive line is giving so much resource to stopping Max and Christian Wilkins in the middle, who also had a powerful game several times. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, but you're right. Like, what we know is that a guy like Malcolm Kuntz can make the most of that opportunity. What we found out today is without Kuntz and then without Tyree Wilson
Yep.
for the majority of the game, suddenly it becomes very thin on that defensive line. And I want to remind everybody, I mean, you know this in the Vegas Heat, but like we're talking about a game in LA that everybody was sweating their butts off for a reason, right? And so even if you think you're in football shape, you start to get to the third or fourth quarter and you are low on your depth. Like that is, we all knew depth would be an issue. And guess what? In the second half, I think for that defensive line, depth was a little bit of an issue. I think the young guys came in and really did a nice job, but still, it would be nice to just have the breath of relief that would come from knowing somebody like Kuntz that you know is a given would be on that field. It's not going to be there, and that's not going to make the next 3 weeks any easier.
No, certainly not. You know, as I look at the flip card here, right? I'm looking at the Raiders defense, defensive ends. You got Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson. Tyree ends the game out. I'm looking at the other defensive end here. We're looking at, Malcolm Coons out. Janaris Robinson. Charles Snowden gets called up. But, so I think, going into this year, Fitz, we all talked about, we all preached about, the calling card of this defense is going to be the depth on the defensive line. And I still think that is going to be the calling card. Now, would we have liked to see that depth tested in early September? Certainly not. But all things considered, I think that group held up fairly well. And I will say, man, as we sit here and try to find some positives as we ultimately kind of collect ourselves going into the marathon that is the next 16 weeks, the Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins tandem, as advertised, right? I mean, huge credit to Patrick Graham, especially in that first half, man. Those guys are flying around. It's creative. It's exotic. And it was, if you're a Raiders fan, you're sitting there and you're looking and you're saying, this is it, right? This is what I expected, and it lived up to the billing.
Yeah, and by the way, that's why sack numbers don't matter, right? Because late in the game, they showed the sack numbers for the Chargers versus the Raiders, and it showed that the Raiders had one sack. That's why pressures matter so much. And Christian Wilkins was absolutely a beast. Butler had a couple of nice moves too, spinning his way into the middle of that defensive or offensive line, I should say. There were so many moments too where they were creative in the usage and the stunting and the ability to get Max inside and outside. Like I just thought it was a beautiful game plan when it came to how do we take our two best chess pieces on the defensive side of the ball and really utilize every ounce of what we're paying for. And that's what they did. Like you can't just look at it and say, okay, this one offensive lineman is going to be responsible for Max Crosby. That's not the way this defense is going to work. And for somebody like Max and somebody like Christian Wilkins, it's never off the field and that has a never-ending motor. That creates never-ending opportunity. Even into the fourth quarter, you could still see how charged they were getting into the backfield. It was disruptive through the whole game. Justin Herbert was seeing ghosts a couple of times. He was throwing the ball too early sometimes, and that isn't something this defense has always been able to create. So yeah, as the season goes on and some healthy pieces come back, that's only going to get even more dominant throughout the course. I still think the Raiders defense has the chance of being top 5 in the NFL. And I think the Raiders defensive line has the chance of being the best in the league. They got to get home a little bit more. That will come though. Conditioning, all of the other things, luck, all of these things. We know sacks come in bunches. That's all going to come. I was just in love with watching a defense play with that level of motor on all 3 levels of defense.
Yeah, I mean, it was a blast to watch. And we, obviously football is a 60-minute game, Jason Fitz. But if we look at the halftime summary here, right, these are the old Chargers offensive line, or excuse me, offensive numbers. They ran the ball, this is at the half, 10 times for 26 yards. Herbert was 9 of 12 for 61 yards and had been sacked once. Like, I don't care who you are in the NFL. If you are able to hold the opposition to 6 points and have those kind of numbers for an all-pro, Pro Bowl type quarterback like Justin Herbert, I mean, you're doing something right. Now, certainly, credit to the Chargers for making the adjustments that they did because the second half, an entirely different story in a lot of ways. But, I mean, if Patrick Graham is able to kind of build on the momentum of that first 30, to your point, if you're able to get some healthy guys back, if you're able to get some guys into football shape a little bit, like this defense is going to give you every opportunity to win football games in 2024. I think at the end of the day, it's just going to come back to this offense taking advantage of those opportunities and not having to be overly explosive, not being this incredibly dynamic, we've never seen this type before, but, really control the line of scrimmage, ball security type of offense. Like I in my heart of hearts, Fitz, I think we're going to be okay. I really do.
The interesting thing, and I agree, by the way, like today didn't change my expectation for the season. Let me say it that way. I'm not suddenly looking at it saying it changed my mindset one way or the other. I think it's interesting because everybody will look at the stat sheet, particularly for Dobbins, big numbers. But there were a couple of big runs. And I think we also have to acknowledge that that's going to happen sometimes when you're talking about a defensive line that is just, and a defense overall that is sending so many exotic things to so many different places. You're taking more risk than you would usually take because let's be honest, you have to take those risks. You're trying to create opportunities for your offense. The problem is you don't have a lot of wiggle room as a defense. And that's going to be something that we're just going to have to accept this year. Like I think I speak for a lot of fans that sat there and thought, man, when this game suddenly got to 16-7, it almost felt helpless. You sit there and say, man, I don't know how the offense is going to get there. So the defense is going to have to find comfort in knowing that the pressure is on them like it feels like 16-17 is going to be that number in the sand, and you can't cross over that. That's a lot to put on a defense every single week. It's going to be a lot for the next several weeks, but I believe this defense is capable of doing it, and not all hope is lost for this season. It's one game.
And I think stating the obvious here too, Fitz, is if there's a defense that is ready to accept that challenge, that's going to have to look in the mirror and say, look, we're going to have to, we can't allow the opposition to score, I'm making up a number here, 21 points. Do you think, I don't know if there's a group better equipped in the league than Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Jack Jones, these big personality alpha dudes that are going to say, you know what, challenge accepted, we're going to run with that.
Yeah, and Jones, by the way, really nice game on a lot of the coverage. I got to go back and watch the all 22, but really nice game in breaking through coverage. Like some of those inaccurate passes from Justin Herbert were inaccurate because Jones was playing perfect angles. So Jones, a really good game on this one. I thought both safeties had a really nice game too. Some of the hits from Epps was, that's what you're looking for, right? Like if Herbert's going to take something underneath, you want to punish the receiver that catches that so much that they have a little hesitation next time. Like it felt like all of that was being done. And I don't think we can overstate this. It was being done with control. Like to watch a defense fly to the ball that much and not make a bunch of critical mistakes with a bunch of critical penalties and a bunch of late hits and all of these different things. No, it was a clean defensive effort. A couple of plays they would want back on those long runs. I accept that. But it was a clean defensive effort where they were still playing with their foot on the gas all the way throughout. That's a positive.
And to your point, Fitz, too, you look back and you look at especially those penalties, right? Like it was the Chargers offense that felt like it was out of sorts, that was undisciplined, that didn't really know how they were getting from A to Z. And it was the Raiders defense that looked like they'd been playing together for years because, to be fair, a lot of them have been playing together for years. A lot of them have been, I do have that continuity under Patrick Graham. But I think it is, to your point, like we forget sometimes, and I try to remind myself of this too, is that as much as we love to hype up the preseason, as much as it's a great opportunity for fodder for conversation and it gives us that it scratches the itch of football, there is an adjustment. There is a learning curve. You are adding new elements to every offense, to every defense, and it's going to take a while. And I understand. Look, I am not naive enough to think that the Raiders fans are going to be like, oh, no, it's okay. Let it take it a month. Like, we don't have the luxury of having it take a month. But I think that if you're a really good defensive unit, like I think the Raiders are, then you have these moments where you say, okay, by and large, it was good. There are a few things that we need to tweak, but this is a group that I think now, with the tape to go back and look at and say, hey, we got to do A, B, C, and D, are now setting themselves up for the rest of the way to be a really dynamic, explosive group.
If Gardner Minshew today had these, I'm just going to read you numbers. These are blind numbers. I didn't tell you I was doing this.
Okay.
If my numbers today for Gardner Minshew were 14 of 29 for 93 yards with a 3.2 average per dropback and a passer rating of 55 yards, we would think the sky was falling, right? 5 rushes for 15 yards. We would think the sky is falling. I'm reading you the actual stat line from Caleb Williams today against the Tennessee Titans in a win. Now, does that mean suddenly that everybody should give up on Caleb Williams? No. It just means that there is an adjustment. Like you mentioned the preseason, Bo Nix was supposed to be just shy of the next Messiah based on the way he played this preseason. Guess what? That did not really help them when they actually had to take on a real defense for Seattle. Like this is all just part of the process. Now, Gardner Minshew's been in the league for a minute. I get that. So I understand that the reasoning or the excuses are different. I will say, and I think it's very fair to say, Gardner's got a lot of things he's got to clean up. There's a lot of things the offensive line has to clean up. There's a lot of things this offense has to clean up. We talk about identity every year. I don't know after one game what the real identity of this offense is. I kept looking at it thinking, I don't even know if they know who they are right now. So I realize that there's things to clean up. I just think this is a nice time to look around in the middle of all the storm that we're in as fans and as people that work around the organization. I think it's important right now to look around and say, hey, guess what? The sky isn't falling for the Jags, even though they lost a close game to Miami. The sky isn't falling for Miami, even though Tua missed Tyreek Hill wide open multiple times in this game, right? Like, so it's just, this is what the first month of the season is now. Now that preseason has been devalued, everything looks clunky early on offensively across the league.
And I will say this too, Fitz, and I think you do. I think you are certainly swimming in the proper pool when you say it felt like the Raiders didn't exactly know what their identity was going to be. I would say this though, like going into today, right? You and I and a lot of people who cover this team and talk about this team knew that Luke Getsy wanted to get the tight ends involved. plural, right? Not just one, multiple tight ends. All right, look at the numbers here, right? And it looks like, as I do my quick rudimentary math, it looks like 11 targets. 11 targets to the tight end. Your leading receiver is Brock Bowers, 6 for 58. But I think that is part of the fundamental philosophy of what we're going to see over the next 3-4 months. It's getting these tight ends involved. I was going back and I was doing my little tallies in my notebook, Fitz. I think it was that drive in the second quarter. There were 4 consecutive passes that went to tight ends. I think it was Bowers, Mayer, Bowers. So, like, to me, that feels like that's going to be part of the identity of what the 2024 Raiders are going to be on offense. And if they want to have success, they're going to have to lean into that. And we talked about controlling the line of scrimmage and having Gardner playing point guard. Well, that's what it is. Getting your ball to the playmaker's hands, being big, strong, and fast at the line of scrimmage and saying, hey, tight ends, our 3 tight ends are better than the 3 guys you're going to have marked up against them. So go eat, Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. In order for that to happen, you're going to have to run the football a little bit better.
Agreed.
And the offensive line is going to have to hold it better. Like, I think it is fair to say at this point that the offensive line had a regrettable day, right? There were moments that they were fine, but as a whole, as a unit, Gardner was climbing the pocket a lot. And unfortunately, you could even see in the broadcast, once he started climbing the pocket, he was hanging on for dear life, as opposed to some quarterbacks that are maybe a little bit more capable of climbing the pocket and then finding somebody. There were a couple of times that looked like Devontae was there for him, but how do you keep, I mean, look, how do you manage to keep your head up and fling the ball to Devontae, even find him open when your pocket's collapsing around you? They're going to have to work on that. They're going to have to get more comfortable with each other. The O-line's going to have to get more comfortable. Gardner's going to have to get more comfortable with just trusting the guys are going to be where they need to be. All of that has to happen in order for this tight end offense to work. I expected more rollouts. I expected more running the football, but to be honest, how can you run the football if every time you try to run the football, it doesn't go well? Like that's the unfortunate, like you and I are both big commit to the run guy.
Yeah.
But no matter what they tried, it didn't matter if they were quick sweeps. It didn't matter if it was counter motion. It didn't matter what they were trying to do. There just weren't holes for the running backs for the majority of this game.
Yeah, and I think, if we're talking about things that were disappointing, we talked about we used the phrase earlier, Fitz, when we're just setting all the tech up, kind of like a unfortunate surprise or an unpleasant surprise. I mean, the fact that Zamir goes for 13 for 44 and with the long run at 12, so if you take that away, he goes 12 for 32, right? Like, that is not the Zamir that we expected to see. That is not the Zamir that I anticipate we're going to see the rest of the way. But, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. There's so much that goes into the run game. We talked about some of the things that the offensive line would have liked to have back. We talk about some of the things that they're going to need to do better the rest of the way to make sure that this offense is able to operate at the level that Luke Getsy wants it to. But it sounds so base level, right? It sounds so simple, but if you become one-dimensional in that way, right? And we talked about the third and short, the fourth and short, the inability to get that 1 yard. It completely changes the dynamic of not only what Luke Getsy is able to call, but your entire offense as a whole over the course of 60 minutes.
Yeah, you're so right. And I think that brings us to obviously what will be a very controversial decision for Raiders fans all week. Everybody will talk about the decision by head coach Antonio Pierce to punt the ball late in the game with 4th and 1 in positive territory. I saw it tweeted out that that's the first time since 2016 that there's been a 4th and 1 in positive territory trailing in the fourth quarter that it wasn't attempted. And I hear that. I genuinely do. But I would ask every single person listening, because I felt it too. The first thing I said is you got to go for it. And then I sat there and thought, do you? Because my God, 3rd and short didn't work early in the game. 4th and short didn't work early in the game, which created the turnover on downs. 2 more 3rd and shorts later in the game. There were a couple of 2nd and 2s that ended up in losses throughout the course of the run. Like, this team never converted with any confidence a short yardage situation. So I hear everybody screaming, you have to punt, you have to go for the football. You can't afford to punt it right there. But I guess my question is, if you've been Charlie Brown on it every time, if every time you run up, the football moves and you just fall on your butt, at some point, don't you say, nah, like I'm not going to do this yet again. And I understand playing the field position game to a certain degree because it came down to inches. If they had gotten any stop from the Chargers there would have at least been the chance to keep things going. I'm not sure that I even could be confident in that offense in that point being able to pick up a 4th and 1 because they didn't pick up any short yardage all game long.
You know who I thought of in that moment, Fitz? And obviously, you're right. It's a discussion that we're going to have. We're going to have the bars over the next couple of weeks. It's going to be in the group chats. Like, should they have gone for it? Should they have punted? What should they have done? But you know who I thought of in that moment was our friend Lincoln Kennedy. And I think I shared the story with you. I'm almost certain I did at some point this offseason. But I was talking to Link. It might have been, I think it was in between the offseason program and mini camp, right? So call it kind of that late spring, early summer. And he hit the nail on the head and he goes, listen, all of us, and he's like, including myself, we have to kind of adjust the way that we think about the Raiders in 2024. He goes, look, for better or for worse, for the past 20 years, we have thought of the Raiders as an offensive team, as a team that, for better or for worse, they are going to either score points or stop in the pursuit of scoring points, right? He goes, the 2024 Raiders are a defense-first football team. And he goes, I'm going to have to adjust to that. You are going to have to adjust to that. The fan base is going to have to adjust to that. Just that thought process, that that philosophy, if you will. So in that moment, right, you're betting on your defense, are you not? You're betting on them that says, hey, this is the best we got. Of our 3 units today, this is the best unit. We're going to trust Max. We're going to trust Christian. We're going to trust Robert Spillane, who his stat line is absurd and was flying around like a lunatic in the best possible way again. We are going to trust them to keep us in this football game, right?
I mean, everything you just said is spot on. And didn't it work? I mean,
Yeah,
earlier in the game, we saw the Chargers punt it away, and all of a sudden it was Raiders get great field possession because they punted, right? Like when you have one of the best punters in the league, and when you have a defense that's playing well, you play field position. And at this point, you really got to look at all of it and say it's no different than playing poker, right? Like sometimes you got to play with the cards you're dealt, right? And I've told you this before, but I love the show Chopped, right? Where you open up the basket of ingredients and you cook with whatever you've got. Well, the basket of ingredients here is different than it is in other places, right? It's not Kansas City's basket of ingredients. It's just different. So how do you suddenly make this into the best dish that you possibly can? You punt, you pin them back, and then you rely on the 2 guys that really are the face of the franchise right now. I would argue that monetarily and for where the future of the franchise is going, Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby are the face. You look at the way, again, you mentioned Spillane and the way that he's played. The rest of the interior defensive line was playing really well. Your linebackers were in good position. There were very few missed tackles throughout this. Your safeties are playing well. Your corners are playing bump up. Nate Hodge had a really nice game and really nice rundown on a couple of different, like you all of your talent is right there. Other than Devontae and Brock, like all of your talent is there. So you go to where your talent gives you the best chance to win the football game. Like, look, at some point, we can scream what we think the Raiders should do. But you make a really good point that if the Raiders are going to mirror the identity of their head coach in Antonio Pierce, does it surprise anybody in the world that he would sit there and say, you know what? I'm going to trust my defense to go out and knock the snot out of somebody. That's Antonio Pierce in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think that, again, I don't want to like be overly cliche with it and overly corny, but I think it is going to require like an active mental, not reset from a lot of us, but a definite change in philosophy, right? And being okay with that, because in previous regimes, right? Oh, we're going to score this amount of points. We're going to be super creative offensively. We're going to do this, that, and the other on the offensive side of the football. And certainly, like, look, I would love that, right? I would love to see the Raiders put up 35 points every week. But to your point, if you look at the ingredients, the best ingredients you got are on one side of the football. Right? And it's just a different side of the football than it's been for the past couple of years. But that doesn't make them any less valuable. That doesn't make them any less delicious. It doesn't make them any less, cornerstones to create and be exciting with, right? So I think that it does just require through 1 week, right? And I think we have to put that in big, bold letters. Put it on in the neon of Las Vegas, Fitz. This was 1 week. But I do think that it is going to require a bit of a level set from all of us.
At the end of the day, we have to remember that it wasn't conservative decision-making that had Gardner Minshew throw a backwards pass. It wasn't conservative decision-making that missed a field goal. It wasn't conservative decision-making that had Zamir White just drop the football off of his hip, right? Those were not conservative decision-making resources, right? But all of those things can result in conservative decision-making. Like when you look at it and say, man, we're not running the football well. Man, the offensive line isn't moving the line of scrimmage well. Man, our running back had a fumble issue and isn't running as aggressively as we thought he would in this. Our quarterback is struggling a little bit to sort of move the ball downfield. Like even if you look at it and say, we've got one play and we're going to get the ball to Devontae, there are enough things that can make any head coach nervous in the process of getting the ball from the snap all the way to Devontae. That's just going to be part of what this team deals with. So conservative decision-making becomes an important part of how this team stays in games. I will stress, the Raiders made more key decisions in this game and still had the chance in the fourth decision. They made more key mistakes, I should say, and still had the chance to win this game late in the fourth quarter. Like that is the path. That is the way that the Raiders are going to win games this year.
And look, it ain't going to be pretty. It's not going to be sexy, right? Like, I don't know if we're going to be living in a world where we see a lot of like 42-35 type of wins for your 2024 Las Vegas Raiders, and that's okay. We're going to adjust. We're going to figure out this adventure along the way. But Fitz, as we look kind of in the, I wouldn't say short term, but the short to medium term, this team now likely flying back as we record this at just a touch before 5 West Coast time, probably getting on the plane back here to Las Vegas, really quick trip from Los Angeles. What do they need to do? If I can give you one thing, right? We can't fix all the mistakes. We can't clean everything up in the span of 7 days. But if there's one thing that you need to see be better as the Raiders travel east to Baltimore next week, and what is it?
Gardner's got to find a better way to trust the routes of Devontae. Because I think there were opportunities late in routes where Devontae was open. And so Gardner's got to trust that he's going to be able to get that ball out to him. And the Raiders as a team are going to have to find a way to push the ball down the field sometimes. Because you're right, it's not explosive. But what do we see in the second half? Everything cheated up. If that's going to happen, you are going to have to use some of the speed that you do have, some of the great wide receivers you do have. You're going to have to find, even if it means you're rolling Gardner out. I would love to see more of Gardner rolling out of the pocket, moving the pocket, and just trying to get the ball downfield. And it's funny. The one time that actually seemed to work, I think, was a mistake by Gardner based on his body language. I don't think that's where he thought the ball was going to go. But I do think that that's a little bit of the playing card that you're going to have to come into, especially taking on a Baltimore team next week that they're going to be tough to stop, man. Like they are going to, Lamar Jackson is going to test everything that you are capable of handling. They've had a little extra time to get ready, a little extra body rest to get ready. This is less than ideal matchup for week 2. So I think you've got to clean up some of the ways to get the ball down the field to Devontae. Even if it's only 12 yards downfield, you got to find a way to feed your superstar on offense if you want defenses to have to account for him.
And I was just thinking about this too, Fitz, while you were talking about that. It feels like we didn't see a lot of that backyard football style from Minshew today, right? And look, at times throughout his career, that's what's gotten in trouble. But for better or for worse, like that's kind of the way people view him as his calling card of what he is as an NFL quarterback. And it feels like we didn't see a lot of that today. So to your point, if he's able to extend the play, if he's able to push it down, is he able to go and give his guys, namely Devontae, a chance to go make plays? I think that is a good thing. That is a net positive for this offense as a whole. Another net positive was seeing you again, my friend. My goodness, I know that I know that we're in constant communication, but seeing you in a professional sense is really, really nice. So you know the deal. On the way out, where can the people find you, Mr. Fitz?
Yahoo Sports. You can find all of my content out there on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page, also on social media at Jason Fitz on Instagram and Twitter. Yahoo Sports, Yahoo College Football, Yahoo Fantasy Football, handling all of it. So basically every day we're making content out there that we're really proud of. So go check it out.
Love it, love it, love it. And you're going to be stuck with us a lot throughout the regular season and hopefully beyond. So you're going to be a busy man, and I know you wouldn't have it any other way. So just to recap, unfortunately, you're silver and black. We lose week 1, 22-10 at the hands of Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. But fear not, because we have a long, long, long way to go. And just because the first chapter of the book wasn't very good doesn't mean that it won't have a good ending. So on that note, Eddie Paskal for our guy Jason Fitz and everyone else at Silver and Black Productions, thank you for hanging out with us, and we will see you guys next week following the week 2 matchup in the 5th quarter presented by Twitch.